The morning Jack Brennan turned 35, the radiator in his apartment chose violence. He woke at 4:30 to the sound of metal groaning, like something dying in the walls, followed by silence so complete he knew the heat was gone for good this time. His daughter Maya slept under 3 blankets and her winter coat in the next room, breath visible in the pre-dawn dark. He pulled on his work shirt and jeans without turning on the light, walked downstairs to the shop and started the space heater he'd been saving for customers. Then he carried it back up and set it by her bed. 35. The age his father had been when he'd walked out. The age when most men had figured out the shape of their lives. Jack stood in the kitchen waiting for the coffee maker to finish its arthritic process and looked at the water stain on the ceiling that had been there when he'd moved in 7 years ago. It hadn't grown. It hadn't shrunk. It just existed, a permanent fixture like debt or loneliness or the machine he'd been building in the back of his shop that nobody except Maya knew about. The coffee tasted like water that had seen a coffee bean once from across a room. He drank it anyway. Through the window, Brooklyn was still dark, the kind of November morning that made you wonder if the sun had finally given up. Across the street, the Korean dry cleaner's neon sign buzzed to life right on schedule. Mrs. Kim never missed a day. Jack respected that kind of discipline. He went downstairs before Maya woke. The shop smelled like motor oil and old paint, and the particular must that accumulated in buildings that had seen 80 years of New York weather. Brennan Auto, the sign out front read, though most of the paint had flaked away, so it looked more like Bren 2 if you squinted. He'd bought the place 6 years ago, with money he didn't have betting everything, on the idea that he could fix enough cars to make the mortgage and feed a 2-year-old whose mother had decided motherhood wasn't her calling after all. He'd been right barely. The shop made just enough to keep the lights on and Maya fed. Nothing left over for things like working radiators or health insurance or the parts he needed for the project in the back room. The project. He moved through the morning routine on autopilot, checking the lift organizing tools, booting up the ancient computer that handled invoices. But his mind was already behind the locked door at the rear of the shop, past the tool chests and oil drums, and the stack of Motor Trend magazines from 2019 he kept meaning to throw out. Behind that door, under a canvas tarp, stood 4 years of work. 4 years of nights after Maya went to sleep. 4 years of teaching himself biomechanics and motor control theory and materials engineering from library books and YouTube videos and research papers he'd printed at the public library because he couldn't afford the download fees. 4 years of failing and rebuilding and failing again. 4 years of keeping a promise to his sister. Kate had died on a Tuesday in March 4 years ago this past spring. Pneumonia that her weakened respiratory system couldn't fight, a direct consequence of the spinal condition she'd been born with. She was 30 years old. Jack had been holding her hand when she stopped breathing, and the thing he remembered most clearly wasn't the sadness or the panic or even the relief that she wasn't suffering anymore. It was the anger. The pure, white-hot fury that in a world where people could build machines to land robots on Mars and make phones that recognized your face, nobody had built the thing that could have given Kate a different life. So he decided to build it himself. The mechanic who'd barely graduated high school, who'd learned everything he knew about engineering, from taking apart engines and putting them back together, who had exactly 0 credentials and even less money. He decided he was going to build an exoskeleton that could help people with incomplete spinal cord injuries walk again. Everyone he'd told thought he was insane. His mother had cried. His few friends had gone quiet and changed the subject. The bank had literally laughed when he'd asked for a business loan to fund medical device research. Only Maya believed in him, and she was 3 years old at the time, so her faith didn't count for much in the real world. But Jack had spent his entire life being underestimated, being told what he couldn't do. He'd grown up in Red Hook with a father who drank and a mother who worked 3 jobs and dreams that nobody took seriously. He joined the Navy at 18 because college wasn't even a possibility, spent 4 years maintaining helicopter engines on a carrier, came home to nothing, built himself into a mechanic people trusted, built a business from borrowed money and sweat. He knew how to work. He knew how to learn. He knew how to not give up. So he hadn't. The frame, as he thought of it, sat on its support rig in the locked back room. Aluminum spine, carbon fiber joints, pneumatic actuators he'd salvaged from industrial equipment and modified with machinist precision. A sensor array he'd wired himself, learning to solder from videos, burning his hands so many times he'd lost count. A harness system he'd redesigned 11 times each iteration, getting closer to something that might actually work. It looked like the skeleton of something that hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet. Part medical device, part robot, part prayer in metal form. He hadn't tested it on a person yet. Couldn't. He had no clinical partner, no medical oversight, no legal protection. What he had was simulation data in motor load testing and a bone-deep certainty that the theory was sound. The engineering was solid. It would work. It had to work. Because if it didn't, then Kate had died for nothing, and he'd wasted 4 years of his life, and he was just a mechanic with delusions of grandeur who'd be better off accepting that some things couldn't be fixed. He unlocked the back room at 6:15, pulled the tarp, and stood looking at the frame in the thin light from the high window. Then he picked up his tools and got to work on the left knee actuator that had been giving him trouble. There was a load distribution issue he hadn't solved yet, a torque variance of 0.3% that was probably acceptable but not perfect. Perfect was what Kate deserved. Perfect was what the next person like Kate deserved. He worked until 7:30 when he heard the floor creak upstairs. Maya awake. He covered the frame, locked the door, and went up to make breakfast. She was sitting at the kitchen table in her pajamas and coat, drawing in her notebook. She'd been drawing since she could hold a crayon, and she approached it with the seriousness of someone conducting scientific research. This morning's subject appeared to be the toaster, which she'd rendered as a rectangular creature with eyes. "Good morning, baby. Sleep okay?" She looked up. The heater was loud, but I was warm. He felt something crack in his chest. 7 years old and already adapting to systems that failed her. Already learning to make do. It was a useful skill in the world they lived in, but he hated that she needed it. Radiator's dead. "I'll fix it this weekend." She nodded, went back to her drawing. "You say that every weekend." "This weekend I mean it." She smiled without looking up. "Okay, Daddy." He made eggs and toast with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing solo breakfast duty for 5 years. They ate in comfortable silence, Maya narrating her drawing process occasionally, Jack mentally running through the day's work schedule. 2 oil changes, 1 brake job. Mrs. Petrakis, coming in at 11, convinced her Buick was trying to communicate with her through the steering wheel. "What are you building in the back room?" His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. "What makes you think I'm building something? I hear you in there. At night sometimes. And there's the door with the lock that I'm not supposed to touch." Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. He'd been so careful, apparently not careful enough. "I'm working on a project. For grown-ups." She considered, this head tilted. "Is it for Aunt Kate?" Everything inside him went still. Maya had only met Kate a handful of times before she died. She'd been too young to understand what was happening, but she knew the photo that sat on Jack's workbench downstairs, knew the stories he told, knew somehow in the way children knew things that Kate was the reason her father spent so many nights in a locked room instead of watching TV like normal dads. "Yeah, baby, it's for Aunt Kate." Maya nodded satisfied and returned to her drawing. Jack sat across from her, feeling like he'd just been seen through by the only person whose opinion mattered. The Bentley appeared outside Brennan Auto at 10:45, a deep blue luxury sedan that cost more than Jack's building. It pulled up to the curb with the smooth silence of German engineering, looking profoundly out of place on a street that usually saw delivery trucks and old Hondas. Jack was under a Toyota at the time, tracing an oil leak. He rolled out when he heard the engine because that engine was making a sound no engine should make. Deep knocking, irregular rhythm. Someone with too much money had done something catastrophically stupid to a very expensive machine. He stood up, wiping his hands on a rag as the driver's door opened. The man who got out was maybe 60, built like someone who'd played football in college and then spent 40 years behind a desk turning that muscle into something harder and meaner. Silver hair cut with mathematical precision. Wool overcoat that probably cost what Jack made in 3 months. He had the face of a man who'd never waited for anything in his entire life and was currently enraged at having to wait now. He looked at Jack's shop the way you'd look at something stuck to your shoe. "You, Brennan?" "That's me. Car's making a noise. I can hear it from here." "Come on in." The man, who still hadn't introduced himself, pulled out his phone and was making a call before he'd taken 3 steps. He walked into the bay talking, stood in the middle, talking, pointed at the Bentley with one imperious finger, while Jack crouched beside the rear wheel and listened. Knock sensor failing. Timing off. Two cylinders misfiring. Whoever had last serviced this car had used the wrong grade of fuel, which in a Bentley W12 was the kind of mistake that made Jack want to weep for the machine itself. The car was in pain. You could hear it. He stood up. It's not catastrophic, but whoever told you this car was fine lied. This is going to take 2 days minimum. The man ended his call. He looked at Jack with flat, assessing eyes. I don't have 2 days. I need it tonight. Then you need a miracle worker, not a mechanic. 2 days. Something moved across the man's face. Not anger exactly. Surprise. The surprise of someone who wasn't often contradicted. He studied Jack for a long moment, recalculating. Nathaniel Hart. He said it like the name itself was currency. Jack had heard of Nathaniel Hart. Everyone in New York had heard of Nathaniel Hart. Hart Properties, half of Manhattan's new luxury developments. The kind of wealth that showed up in Forbes not because Hart sought attention, but because the numbers were too big to ignore. Jack Brennan. I'll have your car done in 2 days, not tonight. Hart's jaw tightened. I'll pay double your rate. Car doesn't care what you pay. It cares what I do to it. 2 days. Hart looked at him for another moment. Then he gave a short, sharp nod. The nod of a man who wasn't used to conceding, but was practical enough to do it when he had no choice. He pulled out his phone again, and then Jack heard the other car door open. He hadn't noticed the passenger. The Bentley's windows were dark, and he'd been focused on the engine. But now the rear door was opening and a wheelchair ramp was extending with hydraulic smoothness, and a young woman was rolling down onto the sidewalk. Jack stood and watched without moving. She was maybe mid-20s, dark hair pulled back simply. Dressed plainly for someone in a Hart vehicle, jeans, gray sweater blanket across her legs. Her face was turned slightly away toward the Korean dry cleaner next door, watching it with the focused attention of someone deliberately not looking at anything in particular. There was something in that posture, that careful blankness, that Jack recognized, not from a specific memory, from something deeper, from watching Kate do the same thing in 100 waiting rooms and parking lots. The practiced art of being present without being vulnerable, of existing in a space without giving the space any power over you. He looked at her for a moment and then deliberately looked away, because he recognized that too. The way people stared. There's a waiting area inside. Coffee's on. It's not good coffee, but it's hot. Hart was already on another call, waving vaguely in acknowledgement. The young woman turned her chair toward the shop entrance. Jack moved to hold the door. I've got it. Her voice was quiet but clear, not asking for help, stating a boundary. Door sticks. Nothing to do with you. She looked up at him then, direct eye contact, assessing whether that was true or whether it was the kind of thing people said. He held the door without moving, and it stuck exactly as he'd said it would. He gave it the specific yank required 3 inches back then, forward, and it opened. 2 inches of weather stripping and a bent hinge. On my list. She pushed through without commenting, but as she passed him, something in her posture shifted. Not quite relaxed, but recognized. Coffee's on the left. My daughter's drawings are on the wall. You don't have to look at them, but she'll tell you about every single one if she gets home before you leave. So consider that fair warning. He heard something then, not quite a laugh. More like the beginning of one that got stopped before it could fully form. But something. He went back to the Bentley. Her name was Sloane. He learned that because Hart, still on his phone, addressed her once before a town car materialized at the curb, and he disappeared into it, leaving his daughter in a mechanic's waiting room with bad coffee and a 7-year-old's artwork on the walls. Jack worked. He was aware of her the way he was aware of everything in the shop, as a variable, as something to account for. He wasn't someone who made people feel watched. He just worked and occasionally came back through the waiting area for a part or a tool, and each time he clocked her without making a thing of it. She wasn't on her phone, wasn't reading anything, just sitting with her hands in her lap looking at Maya's drawings, actually looking at them, not just enduring them. There was a series along one wall, Maya's interpretations of various cars, all of which looked more like potatoes than automobiles. Each one labeled in shaky 7-year-old printing. Daddy's blue truck, Mrs. Petraka's car, the red car that smells weird. Jack watched Sloane read them, her mouth moving slightly, not speaking, just following the words. And for just a moment, her face did something it hadn't done since she'd arrived. It opened, like a window cracked after a long winter. He went back to work on the Bentley. Knock sensor replacement, timing adjustment, fuel system flush. He lost himself in the work the way he always did, the rest of the world fading, until there was only the machine and the problem and his hands knowing what to do. 2 hours later, he came back through for a different socket, and she spoke. How old is she? He straightened up, socket wrench in hand. 7 this past September. She draws cars like they're alive. She thinks they are. Talks to them. Apologizes if they break down. Had a whole conversation with a Camry last month about how she understood it was tired and we'd fix it. Sloane looked at one of the drawings, a potato-shaped thing with enormous wheels and what appeared to be a smile. Did you fix it? Yeah, it took 3 days. Did the Camry feel better? Ran perfect, which I'm choosing to believe was coincidence. This time it was unmistakably a laugh. Short, surprised, like she'd caught herself doing something she hadn't expected to do. Jack went back to the Bentley. Something was shifting in the waiting room. Some kind of temperature change he couldn't quite name. He focused on the timing belt and tried not to think about it. Another hour passed. He was cleaning his hands with a shop rag when he came back in and found her different. Leaning forward slightly in the chair, elbows on her knees. Something tight in her face. Not pain exactly, but the close cousin of it. The particular tightness of someone holding something down by main force. He sat down in the plastic chair across from her. Not because he'd decided to, because something said, sit down. You doing okay? I'm fine. The reflexive answer, the automatic one. He didn't push, just sat there. After a moment, how do you do it? Do what? Just sit with broken things all day. Isn't it frustrating when something doesn't work? He thought about that honestly. No. Broken things make sense to me. Something breaks because something went wrong. A part wore out, a design failed, somebody made a mistake. There's always a reason. You find the reason, you fix the thing. He turned the rag over in his hands. The frustrating part is when people give up on them before they've figured out the reason. She was quiet. He could feel her thinking, processing. Machines can be rebuilt. She said it like she was testing the words, seeing how they felt. Always. Every single one. Some take longer than others. Some need parts you have to invent from scratch. But they can be rebuilt. He paused. He was aware that they weren't really talking about machines anymore. Aware that he was stepping into territory that wasn't his. But he said it anyway. People too. She looked at him. For just a moment he saw past the careful blankness, past the practiced emptiness, saw something that was still very much alive in there. Something tired and frightened and furious and desperately, desperately hungry for a reason to believe something. People too. Her voice was very quiet. People too. He said it the way he said everything, simply, directly, without performance. Not because he was trying to give her hope, because he believed it, because he'd spent 4 years in the back of this shop proving it. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked down. My father will be back in 20 minutes. Coffee's still hot. He went back to work. Nathaniel Hart returned in 35 minutes, not 20. Spent the first 3 on the phone, and the remaining 2 signing the authorization for the repair, which he did without looking at the total. Jack noticed, filed it away, chose not to think about what it meant to be the kind of person for whom money was purely theoretical. The town car pulled up. The wheelchair ramp extended. Sloane guided herself toward the door. She stopped, turned her chair slightly, not quite toward Jack, but enough. Those drawings. Your daughter. Does she know what you build in the back? Jack went very still. He had not mentioned the back. He had not mentioned anything. She was looking at the far door, the one that led past the lifts to the rear of the shop, the door that was always closed, the door with the combination lock that Maya knew never to touch. No, she knows Daddy builds things. That's all. Sloane nodded once, slowly, looked at the door a moment longer. Then she pushed through the front into the November cold. Jack stood in the empty waiting room among the potato car drawings with the particular feeling a person gets when the world has just shifted slightly on its axis. So slightly you can't be sure you felt it. But your body knows. Your body always knows. He went to the back of the shop. unlocked the door, pulled the tarp. The frame stood on its support rig, aluminum and carbon fiber, and pneumatics and hope. He'd been working on it for 4 years and it still wasn't finished. Might never be finished. But it was closer than it had been yesterday, and yesterday it had been closer than the day before that. He picked up his tools and went to work on the left knee actuator. The torque variance was still there, still 0.3% off optimal. He needed to shift the anchor point, needed to recalculate the load distribution. He worked until Maya came home from school. She appeared in the doorway of the back room at 3:15, backpack still on, regarding him with the serious attention of someone conducting an evaluation. The door was open. Just for a minute, I was working. She came in, dropped her backpack with a crash, looked at the frame. Is that the thing for Aunt Kate? Yeah, baby. It looks like a robot. Kind of. It's a frame that helps people walk when their bodies can't walk on their own. Maya walked around it slowly, studying it from all angles. Can I touch it? Not yet. It's not safe until it's finished. When will it be finished? He looked at the frame, at the 4 years of work, at the 0.3% variance that still wasn't solved, at the clinical testing he couldn't do, and the medical oversight he couldn't afford, and the gap between what he'd built and what it needed to be. Soon. Maya accepted this. She had infinite faith in her father's ability to fix things. It was a gift and a burden in equal measure. She picked up her backpack. I'm hungry. Let's go make a snack. They went upstairs. He made her peanut butter crackers and apple slices while she did homework at the kitchen table. Basic addition. She was good at math. Approached it with the same seriousness she brought to everything else. Daddy, yeah, is the robot going to help people like Aunt Kate? That's the plan. That's good. Aunt Kate was nice. She was. She was very nice. Maya went back to her math. Jack stood at the counter and felt the weight of the promise he'd made 4 years ago. The promise to a dying woman that he'd build something that could change the world. The arrogance of it, the necessity of it, the impossibility of it. But he'd never been good at accepting impossible. He finished the Bentley 2 days later, exactly as promised. Hart showed up to collect it with the same town car service, the same phone permanently attached to his ear, the same barely concealed irritation at having to deal with ordinary logistics. Jack handed him the keys and the invoice. Hart glanced at it, handed over a credit card without comment. While they waited for the charge to process, Sloane's voice came from the waiting room. Can I come back? Hart looked up from his phone. What can I come back to the shop? Tuesday morning. The silence that followed was the kind that had texture. Hart looked at his daughter, at Jack, back at his daughter. Why I want to. That's not a reason. It's my reason. Hart's jaw worked. Jack stayed very still, watching a negotiation he had no part in, but was somehow central to. Fine. Tuesday. But I'm sending Marcus with you. I don't need a babysitter. He's a driver, not a babysitter. Tuesday, 10 a.m. Not negotiable. Sloane didn't argue. She'd won the important point. She looked at Jack, and something passed between them. Not a promise, not a plan, just recognition. Hart took his keys and left. The Bentley started with the smooth purr of a properly maintained machine, and Jack felt the particular satisfaction that came from fixing something correctly. Maya came downstairs an hour later. It was Saturday, no school, and she'd been upstairs working on a drawing. She brought it down to show him. It was a portrait, 2 figures. One tall, one small, both rendered in Maya's distinctive style that suggested shapes more than defined them. The tall figure had long dark hair and was in what appeared to be a chair. The small figure was Maya standing next to the chair, holding what might have been a coffee cup. Who's this? The nice lady who was here, with the quiet voice. Jack looked at the drawing, at his daughter's interpretation of a woman she'd barely met, but had somehow decided was worth documenting. She is nice. What made you draw her? I liked her. She looked at my drawings for real, not the fake way grown-ups do. He thought about that, about a 7-year-old's ability to detect authenticity, about Sloane sitting in the waiting room actually reading the labels on potato-shaped cars. Can I put it on the wall? Yeah, that's why I made it. He pinned it up next to the others. Maya stood back and assessed the arrangement with a critical eye, then nodded satisfied. She's coming back Tuesday. Maybe she'll see it. Maybe. "Do you like her, Daddy?" The question landed in the middle of the shop floor like something dropped from a height. He looked at his daughter, who was watching him with eyes that missed nothing. "I don't know her yet, baby, but you will, because she's coming back." "Yeah, she's coming back." Maya nodded, accepting this, and went back upstairs to continue whatever project she was working on. Jack stood alone in the shop, looking at the drawing on the wall, at the careful way Maya had rendered Sloane's face, at the coffee cup in the small figure's hands, at the space between the two figures that suggested connection without contact. He went to the back room, unlocked it, pulled the tarp. The frame stood waiting. 4 years of work, 4 years of promise, 4 years of nights when he should have been sleeping, but was instead teaching himself engineering from library books and YouTube videos. 4 years of not giving up. He looked at the left knee actuator, at the load distribution problem that was still there, still unsolved. 0.3% off, optimal. He thought about Sloane asking if machines could be rebuilt, about the way she'd said people too, like she was testing whether hope was allowed. He thought about Kate, about the promise, about the reason none of this could fail. Then he picked up his tools and got to work. The anchor point needed to move, 3 centimeters lateral. He could see it now, the way the force distribution would change, the way the variance would zero out. It was obvious once you looked at it right. He worked through the afternoon and into the evening. Maya came down at 6 asking for dinner, and he made grilled cheese sandwiches without stopping work, his hands moving between the stove and the workbench with practiced efficiency. They ate together in the back room, Maya sitting on her stool, asking questions about what each part did. Jack explaining in terms she could understand. Why does it need motors? Because some people's bodies can't make their legs move. The motors help them, like a robot that works with your body instead of your body. She thought about this. That's smart. Thanks, baby. Did you think of it yourself? Yeah. Well, Aunt Kate needed it, so I thought of it for her. Maya finished her sandwich. But Aunt Kate died. The words hung in the air. Simple, true, devastating. Yeah, she did. So who's it for now? For the next person like Aunt Kate. For anyone who needs it. Like the nice lady. He looked at his daughter, at the sharpness in her eyes, at the way she'd connected dots he hadn't realized were visible. Maybe. We'll see. I think she needs it. What makes you say that? She looked sad, but like she was trying not to look sad, like she was working very hard at it. Jack thought about Sloane in the waiting room, about the careful blankness, about the tightness in her face when she'd leaned forward, about people too, said in a voice that barely believed it. Yeah, I think you're right. They cleaned up dinner together. Maya went upstairs to get ready for bed. Jack stayed in the back room and worked until midnight, adjusting the anchor point, recalculating the load distribution, running the simulation one more time. The variance disappeared. 0.3% became 0.01, essentially perfect. He sat back and looked at the frame, at the left knee actuator that finally, after 11 iterations, did exactly what it was supposed to do. One problem solved. 1,000 more waiting. But this one was done, and tomorrow he'd start on the next one. And the day after that, the next, until the whole thing worked, until he could put someone in the harness and watch them stand, until he kept the promise he'd made 4 years ago to a dying woman who deserved better than the world had given her. He covered the frame with the tarp, locked the door, went upstairs. Maya was already asleep, 3 blankets and her winter coat pulled up to her chin. The space heater hummed in the corner. He stood in her doorway and watched her breathe, and felt the weight of being the only person standing between her and the world. He was doing his best. He hoped it was enough. In his own room, he lay in the dark and thought about Tuesday, about Sloane coming back, about what it meant that she wanted to come back, about the fact that Nathaniel Hart, who probably could have bought and sold this building without noticing, was sending his daughter to a mechanic shop in Brooklyn because she'd asked to come, about the way she'd looked at the closed door, at the lock, at the space where the frame waited. She knew. Somehow she knew. And on Tuesday he was going to show her. Not because it was ready, it wasn't ready, might never be ready enough, but because she'd asked if people could be rebuilt, and the only way to answer that question was to try. He fell asleep thinking about anchor points and load distribution, and the specific sound of Maya's laugh when she was genuinely delighted by something. And about a woman with careful eyes who'd looked at potato-shaped cars and actually seen them. Tuesday arrived with freezing rain that turned Brooklyn's streets into black mirrors. Jack was in the shop by 6, checking the back room 3 times before 7, making sure everything was positioned right. The frame stood uncovered on its support rig under the work light. He'd spent Sunday and Monday cleaning the space-moving tool chest, creating room, making it look less like a mechanic's storage area and more like something approaching a lab. It still looked like a mechanic's storage area. Maya came down at 7:30, already dressed for school, took one look at him, and delivered her verdict. "You're nervous." "I'm not nervous." "You made coffee twice. There's 2 pots." She was right. 2 full pots sat on the small counter, both fresh. He'd made the first at 6 and forgotten about it. Made the second at 7:15 on autopilot. "I'm being thorough." "Uh-huh." She grabbed a mug, poured herself orange juice, sat at the small table they kept in the front office. "Is the nice lady coming today?" "Yeah." "Are you going to show her the robot, the frame?" "And yes, she's going to like it." "How do you know?" "Because you made 2 pots of coffee, and you only do that when something's really important." He looked at his daughter, who was 7 years old and reading him like a service manual. "When did you get so smart? I've always been smart." "You just notice sometimes." The car service arrived at 9:55. Not Hart's Bentley, but a black sedan with a wheelchair-accessible ramp. Professional operation. The driver got out, opened the rear door, operated the ramp with practiced efficiency. Sloane rolled down, and the driver asked her something Jack couldn't hear. She shook her head. The driver got back in the sedan and pulled away. She'd had him drop her at the shop itself this time, not at the corner. Jack registered that detail and what it meant. Last week she'd wanted distance, plausible deniability. This week she was choosing to be seen arriving here. The door stuck. She gave it the 3-inch back then forward motion without hesitation. She'd remembered. She came in and looked around the shop, seeing it differently now, seeing it as a place she was choosing to return to rather than a place she'd been brought. Her eyes went to Maya's drawings on the wall, found the new one. The portrait. She stopped her chair. "Your daughter drew me. She liked you. She doesn't know me. She knows you looked at her drawings for real. That's enough for Maya." Sloane studied the portrait, the quiet figure in the chair, the small figure beside it, the coffee cup. She's very observant. Runs in her blood. Jack moved toward the back, then stopped. "You want to see it? That's why I'm here." He led her through the shop, past the lifts and tool chests. She navigated the space without asking him to move anything, finding her own path. At the back door, he paused with his hand on the lock. "It's not finished. I want you to know that going in. What you're about to see is a working prototype. It's been tested extensively on simulations and load-bearing models, but never on a person with an actual spinal cord injury, because you don't have access to one." Her voice was level, factual. "Because I don't have clinical authorization, or legal protection, or medical oversight beyond a retired physician who's willing to consult off the record." "Then why are you showing me?" He looked at her directly. "Because you asked if people could be rebuilt, and I think you deserve an honest answer." He unlocked the door, turned on the work light. The frame stood in the center of the room, catching the illumination, aluminum and carbon fiber gleaming. Sloane went very still. She rolled forward slowly, circled the frame once, then again. Her eyes moved over every joint, every actuator, every point of connection. She didn't speak, just looked. And Jack watched her look, watched her process, watched the mechanic's blankness fall away, and something else emerge. "What's the weight tolerance?" 240 pounds with a safety margin of 15%. Range of motion, hip flexion to 90 degrees. Knee extension to full lockout. Ankle dorsiflexion to 20 degrees. Power source lithium-ion battery pack, 8-hour capacity under normal use. Charging time 4 hours. Sensor array, EMG electrodes, reading muscle activation in the upper thighs and core. The system interprets attempted movement and completes the motion through the pneumatic actuators. She reached out, ran her fingers along the left leg assembly. Jack noticed her hands. Pianist's hands. Long fingers. No rings. "You built this yourself." Not a question. An assessment. Over 4 years. Taught myself the engineering, fabricated most of the parts, had help from a machinist for precision work I couldn't do with shop tools. Why he could have told her about Kate, about the promise, about 4 years of work that nobody else believed in. But she wasn't asking for his life story. She was asking for the reason that mattered, because someone needed it and nobody else was building it. She pulled her hand back, looked at him with those careful eyes that missed nothing. My injury is T6 incomplete, thoracic vertebra 6. I have some residual motor signal below the injury site. Not enough for functional movement, but it's there. Your sensor array would pick that up. Yes, if the signal's strong enough, the system would complete the intended movement, not generate it from nothing, amplify what's already trying to happen. That's the theory. Have you tested that theory? No. Why not? Because I don't have anyone to test it on. And because if I'm wrong, if the calibration is off, or the load distribution isn't right, or any of 100 things I haven't thought of yet, I could hurt someone. Badly, permanently, and that's not a risk I'm willing to take on faith. She was quiet for a long time. He let her be quiet. Finally, she looked back at the frame. I want to try it. The words landed in the room and stayed there. You don't know me. You don't know if it works. You don't know what you're asking. I know I've been in this chair for 2 years. I know every doctor I've seen has told me the best I can hope for is maintaining what I have. I know my father has spent a fortune on specialists who've accomplished exactly nothing. And I know you're the first person who's told me the truth about what you don't know instead of lying about what you do. That doesn't make this safe. Nothing about my life is safe. At least this might be useful. Jack looked at her, at the determination in her face, at the way she sat in the chair like she was ready to fight the world and knew she'd probably lose but was going to fight anyway. I need a physician present. Dr. Warren Mitchell. He treated my sister for 12 years. He's seen the specs. He's willing to supervise if the conditions are right. What conditions? Complete medical history, current medication list, baseline vitals, informed consent documentation that makes it clear you understand the risks. And he has to approve the fit before we power anything on. She didn't hesitate. When she pulled out her phone, dialed. Jack heard the ring, then a voice. Dr. Mitchell. It's Sloane Hart. Yes, I know it's been 2 years. I'm fine. I'm calling because I need your help with something. She explained the situation in clinical terms. Incomplete T6SCI, experimental mobility device, need for medical oversight. Jack listened to her translate what he'd built into language a physician would understand. She was smart, precise, not selling it, just presenting it. The conversation lasted 10 minutes. When she hung up, she looked at Jack. Thursday afternoon, his office. He wants to examine me, first review the engineering specs, then make a decision. He said to tell you that if Kate trusted you, he's willing to consider it, but he's not promising anything. Jack felt something shift in his chest. Mitchell had loved Kate like a daughter, had fought for her when other doctors had given up. If he was willing to even consider this, it meant something. Thursday works. She nodded, looked back at the frame. Can I ask you something? Yeah. Your sister, did she know you were building this? No, she died before I started, before I even knew what I was trying to build. So you're doing this for someone who never asked you to. He thought about Kate's funeral, about standing in the cold outside the church, about the promise he'd made to nobody in particular, or maybe to Kate specifically, which was the same thing. I'm doing this because she deserved better than what the world gave her, and because the next person like her deserves better too. Sloane held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked away, but not before he saw something in her face. Recognition. The kind that came from understanding what it meant to carry something heavy for a long time. She rolled toward the door. I should go. My father thinks I'm at physical therapy. You're not, I was. But the physical therapist kept talking about acceptance and managing expectations, and I decided I'd rather spend my time with someone who builds impossible things in machine shops. She was at the door when she stopped, turned back. Thank you for showing me. You haven't tried it yet, I know, but you showed me anyway. That means something. She left. Jack stood in the back room with the frame and the work light and the feeling that something had just started that he couldn't stop even if he wanted to. Maya came down after school and found him making adjustments to the harness system. She watched from her stool for a while, then spoke. Did the nice lady see it? Yeah. What did she think? I think she wants to try it. Are you going to let her? If Dr. Mitchell says it's safe. Is it safe? He set down his tools, looked at his daughter. I don't know yet, baby. That's what we have to find out. Thursday's meeting lasted 3 hours. Dr. Warren Mitchell's office was in a medical building in Sunset Park, 4th floor waiting room, full of elderly patients and outdated magazines. Mitchell himself was in his 60s, compact and precise, with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent 40 years being right about medical decisions. He examined Sloane in a curtained area, while Jack waited in the consultation room. Through the wall, he could hear the murmur of questions, the specific sounds of a neurological exam. Reflexes tested, sensation mapped, range of motion assessed. When they came out, Mitchell gestured Jack to sit. Sloane positioned her chair at the small table. Mitchell pulled up the engineering specs on his tablet and read in silence for 20 minutes. Finally, he looked up. Your load distribution calculations are sound. The sensor calibration protocol is actually more conservative than some FDA-approved devices I've seen. You've clearly done your homework, but you're not a medical device manufacturer. You have no institutional backing, no insurance, no regulatory framework. If something goes wrong, Ms. Hart has no legal protection, and you're personally liable for catastrophic injury. I know, and you still want to proceed. It wasn't a question. Jack looked at Sloane. She looked back. Neither of them spoke. Mitchell closed the tablet. I treated Kate Brennan for 12 years, watched her struggle with equipment that was barely adequate insurance, that covered almost nothing, a system that treated her disability as an inconvenience rather than a priority. She died waiting for technology that should have existed but didn't because there was no profit margin in it. He looked at the specs again. This should exist. You're right about that. And if you've actually built something that works, then people need to know about it. He pulled out a prescription pad, wrote something, handed it to Jack. That's my cell number. You call me before every session. I want vitals before and after. Any adverse reaction, you shut down immediately and call me. No exceptions. Understood. Understood. Mitchell looked at Sloane. You're aware of the risks. I've been aware of risks since the car hit me 2 years ago. At least these risks might lead somewhere. Your father know about this, no? He's going to have opinions. I'm 26 years old. His opinions are noted. Mitchell almost smiled. You're as stubborn as Kate was. That's either going to save you or kill you. She'll need to sign releases. Jack kept his voice steady. Documentation that makes it clear this is experimental, that there are no guarantees. I'll draft something, but understand, both of you, that paper won't protect you if this goes badly. The best legal release in the world doesn't stop a lawsuit. Sloane spoke before Jack could. I'm not going to sue him, no matter what happens. That's not a legal statement, Dr. Mitchell. That's a promise. Mitchell looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood. Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. Bring baseline vitals and a detailed session plan. We start conservative. 5 minutes in harness, no activation. Just fit and comfort. We build from there. He walked them to the door, paused. Jack, Kate would be proud of what you're doing. She'd also kick your ass for being this reckless. Keep that in mind. The first session was on a Tuesday morning in December, with snow threatening outside. Jack had been up since 4, running final checks on the harness system. He'd redesigned it 3 times in the past week, each iteration closer to something that might actually work. Sloane arrived at 8:45. Dr. Mitchell came at 8:50. They gathered in the back room around the frame like surgeons around an operating table. Mitchell took Sloane's vitals. Blood pressure, pulse, respiratory rate. All normal. He examined the harness system, testing every connection point, every strap, every pad. This is medical-grade cushioning, automotive racing seat material. Higher impact rating than most medical equipment. Smart. Mitchell checked the torso support. This has to be firm without restricting breathing. How did you calculate the compression tolerance? Trial and error with mannequins? Pressure sensors. A lot of wrong answers before I found the right one. Show me the fit protocol. Jack walked him through it. Positioning sequence, support points, weight distribution. the specific order of operations that would transfer Sloane from wheelchair to frame without compromising stability. It took 40 minutes to get her into the harness. Every strap adjusted twice. Every pressure point checked. Mitchell hovering like a hawk, stopping them 3 times to recalibrate. Finally, she was suspended in the frame, her weight distributed across the harness system, her legs positioned in the pneumatic sleeves her torso supported, the sensors pressed against her upper thighs and lower back, reading muscle activation patterns. How does it feel, Strange? Like I'm wearing the skeleton of something else. Any pain? No. Pressure, but not pain. Breathing okay? Fine, Mitchell checked her vitals again. All still normal. I want you in this position for 5 minutes. No activation, just acclimation. Tell me immediately if anything changes. Pain, numbness, difficulty, breathing, anything. They waited. Jack watched the clock, watched Sloane's face, watched for any sign of distress. At 3 minutes, Maya appeared in the doorway. Jack hadn't heard her come down. She stood very still, taking in the scene. Sloane in the frame, Dr. Mitchell with his stethoscope, her father at the control panel. Is it working? Not yet, baby. We're just practicing. She came in, sat on her stool. I'll be quiet. 5 minutes passed. Mitchell took vitals again. Blood pressure up slightly but within normal range. Pulse elevated but stable. How do you feel? Like I want to try it for real. Mitchell looked at Jack. Not today. We acclimate first. 3 more sessions like this, then we talk about activation. Sloane's face did something complicated. Disappointment and acceptance fighting for space. I understand. They extracted her from the harness with the same methodical care. Got her back in the wheelchair. Mitchell examined her again. Checked for pressure marks, skin irritation, any adverse reaction. You did well. Tuesday, same time. He left. Sloane sat in her wheelchair looking at the frame. 3 more sessions before we even try to turn it on. Mitchell's being careful. That's a good thing. I know it's a good thing. It's also frustrating. Jack crouched down to her eye level. We have 1 shot at this. If the first activation goes badly, we're done. No second chance, so we make sure the first time is right. She looked at him. What if it doesn't work? Then we figure out why and fix it. That's what I do. I fix things. People aren't engines. No, but the principles are the same. Something's broken. There's a reason. Find the reason, fix the thing. She was quiet for a moment. You really believe that? I've spent 4 years believing it. Not stopping now. She nodded, turned her chair toward the door. Same time next Tuesday. Same time. After she left, Maya spoke from her stool. She's scared. I know. Are you scared? He looked at his daughter. At the frame. At the impossible thing he'd built that might work or might fail catastrophically and end everything. Yeah. I'm scared. That's okay. Being scared means you care. When did you get so wise? She shrugged. I pay attention. The second session went smoother. Sloane arrived knowing what to expect. They got her into the harness in 20 minutes. Mitchell took vitals. Everything normal. Tell me about the sensor calibration. Jack pulled up the data on his laptop. These electrodes read electrical signals from attempted muscle activation. In someone with an incomplete injury like Sloane's, the brain is still sending signals down the spinal cord. They're just not strong enough to produce movement. The sensors detect those signals and route them to the control system, which then activates the pneumatic actuators to complete the movement. Right. The timing is critical. Too fast and it feels unnatural. Too slow and the motion is jerky. We need the frame to respond like her own nervous system would. Mitchell studied the data. You've accounted for signal variance I've built in a learning algorithm. The first few sessions, the system adapts to her specific signal patterns, gets better at predicting what she's trying to do. That's sophisticated engineering. I had good teachers, YouTube and desperation. Mitchell actually smiled. The best combination. They ran the session for 10 minutes. Sloane hung in the harness, acclimating to the sensation of being upright but not standing, her body remembering what vertical felt like. At the end, Mitchell said what they were all thinking. Next week we activate. The third session was different from the moment Sloane arrived. She'd brought something with her, a small violin case. I played. Before, Jack looked at the case, looked at her. You were professional headed that way. Juilliard undergrad, starting grad school when the accident happened. She opened the case. The violin inside was beautiful. Old wood, careful maintenance. The instrument of someone who'd taken it seriously. I can't hold the bow anymore. Not with enough control, but I wanted it here. For luck, maybe. Or as a reminder of what I'm trying to get back to. She set it carefully on the workbench. Jack understood. Some promises you made to the people who died. Some you made to the person you used to be. They got her into the harness. Mitchell monitored. Everything normal. Jack ran the sensor calibration sequence. The system mapped her muscle activation patterns, learning the signature of her attempted movements. Ready, no. But do it anyway. Jack's hand moved to the control panel. There was a single switch. Power on. Once he flipped it, the system would be live. The sensors would be reading. The actuators would be ready to respond. He looked at Mitchell. Mitchell nodded. He looked at Sloane. She was staring straight ahead, jaw set. He flipped the switch. The frame hummed to life. A quiet sound. Motors engaging. Hydraulics pressurizing. The sensors beginning their work. Sloane gasped. Talk to me. What are you feeling? Vibration. The sensors, I can feel them against my skin. Any pain? No. Just awareness. Like the frame is listening to me. That's exactly what it's doing. Jack watched the readouts. Signal strength good. Calibration holding. Try to initiate a standing motion. Don't force it. Just think about standing. Let your body try. How do I think about standing? I haven't stood in 2 years. You remember. Your body remembers. Just try. She closed her eyes. He watched her face. Watched the concentration. Watched every muscle above the injury working at maximum. Watched the sensors pick up the signal route. It to the control system. Watch the system interpret and prepare to respond. The actuators engaged. The frame moved. Sloane rose. Not all the way, not to full standing. Her knees extended, her hips lifted, and she got to about 3/4 height before the signal weakened, and the frame held position supporting her, but not pushing further. She hung there suspended between sitting and standing, breathing hard. Mitchell had his stethoscope on her back. Pulse elevated but steady. Breathing labored but adequate. Keep talking to me, Sloane. How are you feeling? Like I'm about to break. Like I'm already broken. Like this is the hardest thing I've ever done. The signal's dropping. Jack kept his voice calm. Don't force it. Let it build naturally. I'm trying. I know. You're doing great. Just breathe. She breathed. He watched the sensor readout. Watched the signal strengthen slightly. Watched her body learn to communicate with the machine wrapped around it. And then she rose the rest of the way. Full standing height, 5'7", the height she was supposed to be. The room went completely silent. Sloane stood in the frame in the back of Jack Brennan's shop on a Tuesday morning in December, and the work light was honest and direct and caught nothing but the truth of what was happening. She was crying, not dramatically, just tears running down her face while she stared straight ahead at the far wall. How long can I stay here? Mitchell checked his watch. 8 seconds so far. Let's aim for 10. They got to 12. 12 seconds of full standing before the signal weakened, and Jack brought her down slowly, the frame assisting the descent, lowering her gently back to seated position. When the harness released, she slumped forward. Jack caught her shoulders. You did it. She looked up at him. Her face was wet. Her eyes were bright. I stood up. Yeah. You did. 12 seconds. 12 seconds. Next time we'll get 15. Mitchell was checking vitals with shaking hands. Blood pressure elevated but not dangerous. Pulse racing but strong. Respiratory rate high but efficient. He looked at Jack. It worked. Your machine actually worked. It's her machine now. Maya spoke from her stool where she'd been sitting frozen the entire time. That was amazing. Sloane laughed. It came out half sob, half joy. Amazing doesn't even start to cover it. They extracted her from the harness, got her back in the wheelchair. She sat there for a long time not speaking. Finally, she looked at Jack. When can we do it again? Thursday. We need 48 hours between sessions. Let your body recover. I don't want to wait. Neither do I. But we're doing this right. She nodded, wiped her face, looked at the frame with something approaching reverence. 12 seconds. It's not enough, but it's everything. She left. Mitchell stayed behind. You understand what you've done here? I built a machine that helps someone stand. That's what I set out to do. No. You proved that the impossible isn't. That's much more dangerous. What do you mean? Mitchell packed his medical bag. Right now, this is a secret. 3 people and a 7-year-old. But secrets don't stay secret, especially ones this important. When word gets out, and it will get out, you're going to have attention you're not prepared for. Questions you can't answer. Demands you can't meet. Then we'll deal with that when it happens. Will you? Because from where I'm standing, you're a mechanic who just proved that every doctor who told Sloane Hart there was no hope was wrong. That's going to make a lot of powerful people very uncomfortable. Let them be uncomfortable. Mitchell looked at him for a long moment. Kate was right about you. You're too stubborn to know when you're in over your head. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. See you Thursday. He left. Jack stood alone in the back room with the frame and the echo of 12 seconds. 12 seconds that had changed everything. Maya came and stood beside him. Daddy, yeah, baby. Is this going to help lots of people? That's the plan. Good, because Aunt Kate would like that. He put his hand on her shoulder. They stood together looking at the frame at the machine built from hope and desperation, and 4 years of refusing to accept that some things couldn't be fixed. Outside, snow had started to fall. Inside, something impossible had just become real, and Tuesday was only the beginning. The frame malfunctioned on the 6th Tuesday. They'd built up to 47 seconds of standing by then. 3 steps on Thursday. Sloane had been walking with the frame supporting and amplifying her attempts at movement. She'd crossed 4 feet of the back room from the workbench to the tool chest, and Jack had been walking backward in front of her with one hand near the emergency cutoff, watching her face transform from concentration to something approaching joy. Then the left knee actuator seized. The sound was wrong first. A grinding where there should have been smooth hydraulic motion. Jack's hand was already moving toward the cutoff when Sloane's weight shifted forward the frame, failing to catch her descent, her shoulder slamming into his chest as he grabbed her. They went down together. Not hard, he'd caught most of her weight, but down nonetheless. The frame powered off automatically, safety protocols engaging. Sloane ended up half on top of him on the concrete floor, breathing hard, and for a moment neither of them moved. Are you hurt? Her voice was tight, controlled. The voice of someone assessing damage before admitting to it. No. I don't think so. My shoulder. Mitchell was already there with his stethoscope and his 30 years of emergency response training. He helped Sloane into her wheelchair while Jack extracted himself from the inert frame, got her seated, checked her vitals, examined her shoulder with careful hands. Bruising, no dislocation. You'll be sore tomorrow, but nothing's torn. Jack was on his knees beside the frame, already identifying the problem. The pneumatic line to the left knee actuator had developed a microfracture. Pressure loss. System failure. The exact scenario he'd been trying to prevent for 6 weeks. I'm sorry, Sloane looked at him. Don't. I should have caught this. Should have replaced this line 2 sessions ago when I first noticed the pressure variance. You noticed a variance 0.2%. Well within tolerance. I thought I had time to monitor it, but you didn't. No. How long to fix it? The line I can replace in an hour, but that's not the problem. The problem is I've been building this from salvaged parts and self-taught engineering. I'm running into the limits of what I can do in a machine shop with automotive tools. You nearly got hurt because I'm pretending to be a medical device engineer, and I'm not one. He stood up, looked at the frame. At 6 weeks of progress that had just crashed into the reality of his own limitations. I need to redesign from scratch. Proper materials, proper fabrication, 6 weeks minimum, maybe 8. Sloane's hands were in her lap. That gesture Jack had learned meant she was holding something down. So we stop. Not stop. Pause. Get it right this time. Her jaw tightened. I was walking Jack. 3 steps. Do you understand what that means? I felt my left foot. Actually felt it. Not through the sensors, through my actual foot. For the first time in 2 years, my brain connected to something below my injury, and it worked. I know. And the next failure might not be a bruised shoulder. It might be a fall that re-injures your spine, that paralyzes you completely. The room went quiet. Mitchell cleared his throat. He's right, Sloane. What you've achieved is remarkable, but Jack's working without institutional support. One bad fall at the wrong moment, and we're talking about permanent damage. Sloane looked between them. At the frame. At her hands. Fine. 6 weeks. But I want to be involved in the redesign. I want to understand every component, every decision. This is my body in that machine. I deserve to know exactly how it works. Jack felt something shift. She wasn't backing down. She was claiming ownership. Deal. The machinist's name was Garrett Shaw. Jack found him through a referral from a tool supplier, a guy who'd spent 20 years in aerospace fabrication before going independent. His shop was in Red Hook, a converted warehouse with CNC mills and laser cutters, and the kind of precision equipment that cost more than Jack's building. Shaw looked at Jack's blueprints for exactly 90 seconds before delivering his assessment. This hip joint is the smartest thing I've seen in 10 years. This lower strut is a disaster. Who welded this? I did. With what, a blowtorch and prayer, pretty much. Shaw shook his head. You've got good instincts and terrible execution. Half of this needs to be completely refabricated. The other half needs to be thrown out and started over. Can you do it? Can I do it? I could do this in my sleep. Question is whether you can afford me. Jack had been expecting this. He'd done the math. Had the number ready. I can pay you $8,000 up front. Another 12 when the work is done. That's everything I have. If it's not enough, tell me now and I'll find someone else. Shaw studied him, looked at the blueprints again. Who's this for? Someone who deserves equipment that won't fail her. Shaw pulled out a calculator, did some math. 15,000 total. But I want materials cost documented, and I want to meet her. Why? Because if I'm building something that's going to carry a person's weight, I want to know whose weight I'm carrying. Fair. They shook on it. Shaw said he could have the components ready in 5 weeks, working nights and weekends. Sloane started coming to the shop on days that weren't Tuesday. She'd arrive in the afternoon, roll into the back room, and watch him work on the redesign. She didn't talk much, just observed, asked questions that were precise and technical. Why titanium instead of aluminum for the new spine assembly, strength-to-weight ratio? Titanium gives us the load capacity we need at 20% less weight. Less weight means less energy consumption, longer battery life. Cost difference, significant, but worth it. She made notes in a small leather journal, drew diagrams. Jack realized she was building her own understanding of the system from the ground up. On the third visit, she brought her violin, set it on the workbench while she worked through the technical drawings. You don't have to bring that every time. I know. It reminds me what I'm working toward. Playing again. Standing on a stage. Feeling the instrument against my shoulder the way it's supposed to feel. You could play sitting. I did. For 6 months after the accident. Every therapist told me I should be grateful I could still use my hands, that I should adapt. But it's not the same. I'm not interested in adapted when I can work toward restored. Jack understood that. Had been living that philosophy for 4 years. You're stubborn. So are you. It's why this is going to work. The 4th week, Nathaniel Hart showed up at the shop unannounced. Jack was under a Subaru when he heard the door. He rolled out expecting a customer and found Hart standing in the bay in another expensive overcoat. Mr. Hart, I want to talk about my daughter's been coming here 4 times a week, missing her standing appointments, lying to me about where she is. She's an adult. Her schedule is her business. You're experimenting on her with unlicensed medical equipment. I'm helping her walk. Hart's expression twisted. Not quite anger. Something closer to fear wearing anger's clothes. I've spent 2 years and 7 figures hiring the best specialists in the country. Rebuilt our home to accommodate her needs. And you're telling me a mechanic accomplished more in 6 weeks than they did in 2 years? I'm telling you your daughter wanted to try something different, and I was willing to help. By risking her spine, by believing her when she said she was willing to take that risk. Hart crossed the space between them. He was shorter than Jack, but carried himself like someone used to winning arguments through presence alone. If she gets hurt, if your machine fails and causes permanent damage, I will destroy you. I will sue you for everything you have and everything you'll ever have. I will make sure you never work again. Am I clear? Jack met his gaze without flinching. Crystal, now let me be clear. Your daughter walked 3 steps last Tuesday. Actually walked. She's going to do it again when the redesign is finished. You can threaten me all you want, but that doesn't change what already happened. Hart stared at him. Something was working behind his eyes. Calculation, reassessment. Show me. Show me this machine? They stood in the back room looking at the partially disassembled frame. Jack walked Hart through the components. The sensor array, the pneumatic actuators, the control system. He explained it in clear terms without softening the technical reality. Hart listened, asked questions that were smarter than Jack expected. This is sophisticated engineering. I had good motivation. Your sister. Hart had done his homework. Kate. Yeah, she died because the equipment she needed didn't exist and nobody was building it. So I built it. For free. Not for free. For her. There's a difference. Hart walked around the frame, studied the harness system. What do you need, excuse me, to finish this properly? To make it work reliably? What do you need? The question landed in the room like something dropped from height. I need a fabrication partner who can work to medical device tolerances. I found one. Costs $15,000. I'm paying for it. What else? Better sensor array. Clinical grade components cost about $8,000. Battery system needs upgrading another $3,000. Control system processor could be twice as fast with the right hardware, that's $5,000. And I need proper medical oversight. Someone better than a retired physician consulting off the record. Hart pulled out his phone. Made a call. Marcus, I need you to cut a check. Made out to Garrett Shaw in Red Hook, $15,000. He hung up. Looked at Jack. Give me the specs for the sensors and battery system. I'll have the components delivered by Friday. As for medical oversight, I know the best spinal cord specialist on the East Coast. She'll review your work, provide supervision if it meets her standards. Jack felt the conversation getting away from him. I don't want your money. I'm not giving you money. I'm funding a medical device trial that my daughter is participating in. There's a difference. Hart pulled out a business card, handed it to Jack. Dr. Sarah Vance, Columbia Presbyterian. Tell her I sent you. He moved toward the door, stopped. One more thing. You hurt her accidentally or through negligence, and you'll wish I just sued you. He left. Jack stood holding the business card. Maya appeared in the doorway. Was that Sloane's dad? Yeah. Is he going to help? I think so. The redesign took 7 weeks. Garrett Shaw delivered components that were works of art. Precision machining. Perfect tolerances. Jack assembled the new frame over 3 days, working with a care that bordered on obsession. Dr. Sarah Vance came to inspect the work. She was 50 compact with the kind of intensity that came from spending 20 years making life or death decisions. She examined every component, read every spec sheet, questioned every design choice. At the end of 4 hours, she looked at Jack. This is better than some FDA-approved devices I've seen. Your sensor integration is more sophisticated than institutional research I'm familiar with. You'll supervise trials on 2 conditions. First, I'm medical director. Final say on all safety protocols. Agreed. Second condition. You let me document this. Properly. Every session recorded, every data point captured. If this works the way you think it does, people need to know about it. Jack thought about exposure, about attention he wasn't prepared for. As long as the focus is on the science, not on me. Deal. They started the new trials on a Tuesday in February. 6 patients. Sloane was first, but there were 5 others. People Dr. Vance had identified from her practice. All incomplete spinal cord injuries in the right range. Dalton Webb was the one Jack would remember. He was 42, former construction foreman. T5 injury from a building collapse 3 years ago. He came into the shop with the careful wariness of someone who'd been disappointed before. This actually worked, we're about to find out. Getting him into the harness took 30 minutes. He was bigger than Sloane, different proportions. They adjusted everything. Dr. Vance monitored vitals. Mitchell assisted, having agreed to work alongside Vance on the trials. Finally, Dalton was suspended in the frame sensors reading system live. Okay, try to stand. Dalton closed his eyes. Jack watched his face. Every muscle above the injury working at maximum. The actuators engaged. Dalton rose. Not smoothly, not easily. He got to 3/4 height and held there for 20 seconds, his whole body shaking. Then the signal strengthened, and he rose the rest of the way. 6'2", full standing. His eyes opened. He looked straight ahead. Been 3 years. His voice was barely a whisper. How long can you hold it? As long as I need to. He stood for 90 seconds before the signal weakened. Jack brought him down slowly. When the harness released, Dalton sat in his wheelchair with his hands covering his face. Dr. Vance checked vitals, made notes. That was remarkable, Mr. Webb. Dalton looked up. His eyes were wet. When's the next session? Thursday. I'll be here. Over 6 months the trials ran. 4 of the 6 patients achieved functional standing. 3 progressed to walking with frame assistance. Dalton became the success story Jack hadn't expected. By month 4, he was walking 12 feet in a session. By month 5, 20 feet. Sloane progressed too. By month 3, she was walking 30 feet. By month 5, standing for 5 minutes at a time. And then the article happened. Dr. Vance had submitted a paper to a rehabilitation medicine journal. Clinical documentation. Results. Data. The journal published it in August. A reporter from the Times read it. Called the shop on a Tuesday morning. Is this Jack Brennan? Yeah. This is Jennifer Martinez from the New York Times. I'm calling about the exoskeleton device you developed. I don't do interviews, I understand. But what you've accomplished is newsworthy. A mechanic building a device that's getting results comparable to institutional research. That's a story people need to hear. People don't need to hear about me. They need to hear about the patients who are walking because of you. That stopped him. It's not about me. It's about them. Then let me write about them. But to understand that I need to understand what you built and why. He agreed to 1 hour. She came Thursday with a photographer. They talked for 3 hours. She interviewed Dalton, who spoke about what the frame meant. Interviewed Sloane, who explained her experience with clarity that made Jack's chest tight. The article ran the following Sunday. Front page of the Metro section. Brooklyn mechanic builds what medical science said couldn't be built. The phone started ringing Monday morning and didn't stop. By Wednesday, Jack had received 43 calls. Reporters, patients, medical device companies, a documentary filmmaker, someone from the FDA, a law firm representing a competing company asking about patents. He stopped answering. Thursday afternoon, a car pulled up. A man in an expensive suit got out carrying a briefcase. Jack Brennan, yeah. Daniel Kim. I represent MedTech Solutions. We're a medical device manufacturer based in Boston. We'd like to make you an offer. Not interested. You haven't heard the offer. Don't need to. Not selling. $8 million for the patent rights and complete technical documentation. We'll license the technology, put it through proper FDA approval manufacture at scale. Plus, we'll establish the Kate Brennan Foundation in your sister's name with an endowment of $2 million. The number landed in the shop like something physical. Jack set down the wrench he was holding. Get out. Mr. Brennan, this is a serious offer. I'm seriously telling you to leave. You're a mechanic working out of a garage. We're a company with resources to take your device global. We can help hundreds of thousands of people. You're limiting that by controlling everything yourself. I built this for people who can't afford $200,000 medical devices. You're going to price it exactly like every other piece of equipment that exists. So no. Get out. Kim pulled out a contract, set it on the workbench. The offer stands through Friday. Think about what $8 million could do for your daughter, for your future. Think about whether your pride is worth more than that. He left. Jack stood looking at the contract without touching it. Maya came down 20 minutes later, found him still standing there. What's that someone who wants to buy Aunt Kate's machine? Are you going to sell it? He looked at his daughter. At the life he wanted to give her. At $8 million that could pay for everything she'd never had because he'd spent 4 years building something for strangers. No, baby, I'm not going to sell it. Good. Aunt Kate wouldn't want you to. How do you know? She picks up the contract, carries it to the trash, drops it in. Because you taught me that some things are worth more than money. That night he called Nathaniel Hart. They met at a coffee shop in Park Slope. Hart arrived exactly on time, ordered an espresso, sat across from Jack at a corner table. You said you wanted to talk. Jack slid a piece of paper across the table. Numbers, projections, manufacturing costs. I want to partner with you. 60-40 split. You get majority equity and you fund manufacturing and distribution. I retain design control and pricing veto. We established the Kate Brennan Foundation as a nonprofit. Every device we sell in the U.S. gets subsidized so patient cost never exceeds $15,000. International sales at market rate fund the domestic subsidies. Hart read the proposal. Read it again. You just turned down $8 million to negotiate yourself a worse deal. I turned down $8 million to keep control of who this helps and how much it costs them. That's not a worse deal. That's the only deal that matters. Hart was quiet for a long time. I rejected your sister's funding request 4 years ago. Did you know that? Jack went very still. I wrote to 50 people asking for help buying equipment Kate needed. You were one of them. My assistant sent the standard no letter. I never saw it. Didn't even know it existed until after Sloane started coming to your shop, and I did background research. Hart set down his espresso. My wife died 22 years ago. She had a spinal condition similar to your sister's, similar to Sloane's. I spent a fortune trying to fix it, hired the best doctors, bought the best equipment. None of it worked. She died when Sloane was 4 years old. He looked at Jack directly. I rejected your letter because I'd convinced myself nothing could be done, that if my money couldn't fix it, nothing could. And then you proved me wrong. You proved that what mattered wasn't resources, it was giving a damn. So yes, I'll partner with you. 60-40, your terms, because you've earned it. They shook hands across the table. One condition. Hart raised an eyebrow. Sloane's involved, not as a patient, as co-director of the foundation. This is her life, her experience. She deserves a voice in how this develops. Agreed. They worked out details for another hour. Hart made calls, connected Jack with manufacturers, regulatory consultants, patent attorneys. The following Tuesday, they held the first foundation meeting. Jack, Hart, Sloane Drive, Vance, Garrett, Shaw, and 2 attorneys. They met in Hart's downtown office. The meeting lasted 4 hours. They established protocols, manufacturing timelines, patient selection criteria, funding structures. Sloane spoke with the authority of someone who lived in the frame, who understood its capabilities and limitations from experience. At the end, Dr. Vance presented her findings. We're now at 47 patients in active trials across 6 facilities. 32 have achieved functional standing. 21 are ambulatory with frame assistance. 3, including Mr. Webb, are showing measurable neural pathway development. She pulled up data on the screen. This is unprecedented. The recovery rates we're documenting exceed anything in the current literature. Jack, what you've built isn't just a mobility aid. It's potentially a rehabilitation tool that's helping people's nervous systems heal. The room was quiet. Hart spoke. What's the timeline to FDA approval? 18 months minimum. We need expanded trials, long-term safety data, manufacturing quality controls. But we have a strong case. And in the meantime, compassionate use applications for patients who meet the criteria. We can help people while we navigate approval. Sloane looked at Jack. Pride, recognition, something else he didn't have a name for yet. The meeting ended. People filed out. Sloane stayed. They were alone in the office. Light from the windows threw patterns across the floor. You did it. We're not done yet. No, but you proved it could be done. That's what matters. She moved her chair closer. Jack didn't step back. I'm not just a patient anymore, Jack. I'm co-director of a foundation, a partner in this. We're going to be working together for years. Yeah, so I need you to know something. When I came to your shop that first day, I was looking for a reason to believe something was still possible. You gave me that. You gave me more than that. She reached out, took his hand. I'm not asking you for anything you're not ready to give. I just need you to know that what you built saved more than my ability to walk. He held her hand, looked at her. At the woman who'd walked into his shop 8 months ago and changed everything. I know. 18 months later, Dalton Webb walked his daughter down the aisle at her wedding, walked unassisted the frame, providing just enough support to make it possible. Jack and Maya watched from the 5th row. When Dalton reached the altar and turned to see his daughter's face, he was crying. After the ceremony, Dalton found Jack at the reception. 3 years I couldn't stand for her, couldn't walk her to school, couldn't do any of the things a father's supposed to do, And today I walked her down the aisle. He grabbed Jack's hand, shook it hard. You gave me that. You gave me my daughter's wedding day. I don't have words for what that's worth. You did the work, Dalton. You showed up every Tuesday. You didn't give up. Neither did you. The frame had a different name now. They called it the Brennan Heart Mobility System. It had been approved for compassionate use in 14 states. Full FDA approval was 6 months out. 93 patients were using it in supervised settings. 27 more were on the waiting list. Jack's shop had expanded into the space next door. He'd hired 3 apprentices, taught them fabrication, assembly, calibration. They built each frame to order customized to individual patients. Maya was 9 now. She helped in the shop after school, had her own workstation, understood the sensor calibration process better than some adults. She'd started designing improvements to the harness system, small things that made the fit more comfortable. The foundation office had proper staff, a medical advisory board, partnerships with 3 research hospitals. Letters came daily from people wanting devices, wanting to participate in trials, saying thank you. Jack read every letter. One came in October from a woman in California, a nurse who'd worked with spinal injury patients for 30 years. She wrote that she'd been waiting her entire career for technology like this, that she'd watched patients be told nothing could be done, that Jack had proved something she'd always believed, that giving up was a choice, not an inevitability. He kept that letter in his desk drawer. On a Saturday evening in late October, Jack closed the shop early. Maya had been asking to go to the park, and he'd been putting it off for weeks because of work. But today he said yes. They walked to Prospect Park, the city at sunset, the air getting cold. They stopped for ice cream even though it was almost winter. Maya had chocolate. He had vanilla. They sat on a bench outside eating it, watching people pass. Daddy, yeah. Remember when I asked if you kept your promise to Aunt Kate? Yeah, did you? He thought about the 93 patients. About Dalton walking his daughter down the aisle. About Sloane, who was performing a charity concert next month, standing with her violin and the frame supporting her. About the letters. About the 4 years of work that had started in a locked room and had grown into something that was changing lives. Yeah, baby, I think I did. Good, she would be happy. They finished their ice cream, started walking home. Maya's hand found his. Sloane's coming to dinner tomorrow, right? Yeah. Do you love her? The question sat between them. Direct. Honest. Yeah, I do. Does she love you? I think so. Good. You should tell her. When did you become an expert on love? I pay attention. It's my superpower. They walked the rest of the way in comfortable silence. Up the stairs to the apartment above the shop. The radiator worked now, had worked for over a year. Maya went to do homework. Jack stood at the kitchen window looking down at the shop. At the lights still on in the back room where the new prototype was taking shape. A lighter version. Faster response time. Better battery life. Always building the next thing. The better thing. His phone buzzed. Text from Sloane. Still on for tomorrow. I'm bringing my engineering notebook. And wine. He texted back. Looking forward to it. She sent back a smile emoji. Then another text. Thank you. For everything. For believing before I could. He looked at the message for a moment. Thought about the day she'd first come to the shop. About the careful blankness in her face. About the way she'd looked at Maya's drawings and actually seen them. About 12 seconds of standing that had changed both their lives. He typed. You believe first. You just needed someone to believe with you. After Maya was asleep, he went down to the shop. Pulled the tarp off the new prototype. It was lighter. Faster. The ankle joint finally calibrated correctly after 2 years of iteration. He picked up his tools and got to work. Through the window, Brooklyn went on. People heading home. Cars passing. The city in perpetual motion. Inside, a man kept building. One bolt at a time. One adjustment. One improvement. 4 years ago, he'd made a promise to a dying woman. Said he'd build something that could change the world. Everyone had thought he was crazy, but he'd built it anyway. And people were walking. The word impossible, he'd learned, was just an opinion, not a fact. All it took was someone stubborn enough to prove it wrong. Someone who looked at broken things and saw possibility instead of limit. Jack had been that person, would keep being that person. For Kate, for Sloane, for Dalton and the 92 others, for the hundreds waiting, for everyone who'd been told nothing could be done and deserved to hear a different answer. He worked until midnight, made the adjustments he'd been planning, tested the new actuator response time, ran the simulation one more time. Perfect. He covered the prototype, locked the shop, went upstairs. Maya's door was cracked open. He looked in. She was asleep under her blankets, breathing steady and deep. 7 years old, becoming 9. Growing up in a shop where impossible things became real. In his own room, he lay in the dark and thought about tomorrow. About Sloane coming to dinner. About the conversation they'd been circling for months. About the life they might build together if he was brave enough to ask. About the fact that he'd spent 4 years building a machine to help people stand, and maybe it was time to let himself stand with someone too. He fell asleep thinking about anchor points and load distribution and the specific sound of Maya's laugh when she was genuinely delighted by something. And about a woman with careful eyes who'd looked at his daughter's drawings and actually seen them, who'd walked into his shop looking for hope and had given him hope in return. In the morning, he'd keep building, keep improving, keep making the frame better for the next person who needed it. But tonight, he let himself rest. Let himself believe that some promises once kept opened the door to new ones. Let himself imagine a future that looked different than the past 4 years of solitary work. Outside, Brooklyn slept. Inside, a mechanic dreamed of what came next. And the frame stood in the back room waiting for Tuesday, ready to help the next person stand.